These are the DZO Vespid IIs. Essentially, this is the lens you would get if the Vespid Is and the DZO Arliss had a baby. Many of the things that DZO learned from developing the Arliss series have been brought into the Vespid IIs, including the lens coating. This is going to give you some of the image character traits that you get out of the Arliss in a smaller, less expensive package. They're also going to be smaller and lighter than the original Vespids. This is going to make them ideal for use on gimbals or the DJI Ronin 4D. And when you compare these to the original DZO Vespids, these lenses are sharper edge to edge, have less chromatic aberration, better flare control, and overall provide a cleaner image than the original Vespids. But I don't want that to sound like they don't have a bit of character or a little bit of a vibe to them, because they do. I think the flare, the vignette, and the quality of the out of focus areas all provide a really nice image, which kind of reminds me a bit of the DZO Arliss. At the time of release, there's going to be 6 different focal lengths: an 18, a 24, a 35, a 50, an 85, and a 105. I'll put some links in the description down below to the best pricing I could find on the lenses, as well as any discounts I know about. They're going to be available as individual lenses or as a 6-lens set with a case, and if you buy them as a set, you do get a pretty significant discount. In full disclosure, DZO did send these lenses out to me at no cost to myself. They haven't paid me to make this video, and they've had no say in the making of the video. I really love that with their first release, they gave us a nice wide lens like the 18mm. It's not uncommon when new CINE lenses are announced that they start at 24 or 25 with wider focal lengths coming down the road, but starting at 18 gives a true ultra wide option, but it also makes the set a lot more useful on a Super 35 camera. And I think because of the resolving power of these lenses, they will work equally well on Super 35 or full frame cameras. Just looking at the build on the lens, they're all going to come in PL mount, and the one thing you're going to notice is the optics sticking out the back. Most of the lenses have the optics sticking out the back like this. This means that you cannot use an ND adapter or an expander. You can only use a normal adapter on mirrorless cameras. The other thing you're going to notice is this little LEMO port thing here. That's for updating the firmware of the Cooke technology. Now, all the lenses are identical size, and they're a very, very similar weight. I think there's less than 100 grams between the heaviest and the lightest, but most of them are within 50 or 60 grams of each other. That means in most situations, you're not going to have to rebalance your gimbal. Also, because of the same size, it's going to be swapping lenses when you're using a matte box pretty easy. You've got an 80mm diameter on the outer diameter, 77mm filter thread on the front, and the focus and aperture rings line up identically across all of the lenses. And the focus is a 300-degree throw, and the aperture is a 1/4 turn. And I think the stiffness and the dampening on both of them are absolutely perfect. And I think it's probably my favorite as far as how it feels in the hand of all the budget CINE lenses I've tested. Now, one of the noticeable differences you're going to see between these and the Vespid Is and a lot of budget CINE lenses out there is the noticeable jump in sharpness and detail, particularly across the whole frame. Now, I just want to say that the Vespid Is have always been plenty sharp enough for me, and I love the images coming out of those lenses. But if you want a little bit more resolution and detail, and you want to take advantage of these higher megapixel cameras that we're getting now, the Vespid IIs are definitely going to do that for you. And all of the lenses, I would say, are equally incredibly sharp. In our testing, we didn't find a weak one amongst the bunch, which is pretty important because you don't want to be shooting a scene and think, oh, we want a really detailed image in this scene, and then have to think about which focal length that you're using. They're all so similar to each other that in real world results, you're not going to pick them apart. The other thing is they're not just sharp in the center. They have this really clean look that is sharp all the way to the edges of frame, and in many cases all the way to the corner of frame. So you have a lot of detail across the entire frame. This is absolutely personal preference, whether that's the type of image that you want. But because of that, they do kind of remind me of this baby Arliss series look, but just like with a little bit more vignette and a little bit lower maximum aperture. But they are noticeably sharper lens than the Vespid Is and a lot of other budget CINE lenses out there. Looking at control of distortion, they were all exceptionally good, with the 18, 24, and 35 having the most modest amount of barrel distortion, and then the 85 being absolutely perfect. When I did shoot them in open gate, I got a little bit more of that barrel distortion, but when I shot them in 16:9, the lines close to the edge of frame were virtually perfectly straight, and they say that there's like less than 1% distortion across the average lens in the set, and my real world results bore that out. So you're not going to have to worry about distortion. It's nothing you're going to be correcting in editing. Looking at Vignette, this is something that I don't think we talk enough about when picking a set of cinema lenses, because Vignette will impart a very specific look on your images, either having Vignette or not having Vignette. And as an example, when I look at the DZO R-list footage that I get, there is almost no vignette in those images. They are bright all the way to the corners, and it gives you this very specific look. Makes me feel like I'm seeing something on an IMAX screen or something. It is so bright and big. Where when you use lenses that have a little bit of vignette, it kind of makes the image closed in. It feels more intimate, and it draws the viewer more to the center of frame or what you're putting in the middle of frame. So I think vignette is something that we should really consider when we're looking at cinema lenses. And I don't think it's good or bad. It's just more about making the right decision for your production. And what I noticed about the Vespids right from T1.9 is they all have moderate to heavy vignette, depending on which lens that we're looking at. As you stop it down to T2.8, it's significantly less, but the 18mm still has quite heavy vignette. And once we're down to T4, the 50, 85, and 105, it's mostly gone. The 24, 35, and 85 still have a mild amount of vignette. And from T5.6, 18, 24, and 35 still have vignette, and 50, 85, and 105 have little to none. So vignette for me is not a plus or a minus. It's not a good or bad performance. It's just really what kind of image you're looking for. And in most cases, I really like having a bit of vignette in my images. Now, another important thing about CINE lenses is that they have colors that reasonably match, and DZO are advertising these lenses to have a color match plus or minus 200 Kelvin. And when I tested them and I shot the color charts, they were all within that margin of error. And then I compared the test charts on the vector scope, and they were all close enough that I don't think you're going to notice any difference between the lenses. And if you do, it would be very easy to correct in editing because the colors are reasonably close. Probably one of my biggest surprises about these lenses was the chromatic aberration performance and the longitudinal chromatic aberration. There was basically none. In all the real world shoots that I did, even backlit coming through windows in high contrast scenes, it was so exceptionally clean, and I was really surprised. That is highly unusual for budget CINE lenses. This is one place they often suffer a bit, but the Vespid IIs are absolutely clean. A very similar performance to what I was getting out of the DZO R-list. The other place that the Vespid IIs are a real step up from the Vespid Is is the flare control, and they have the same coatings or lens coatings as the DZO R-list, and they handle flare exceptionally well without actually completely negating the flare altogether. Similar to the R-list, they just have a nice, soft, pleasing flare. And if you get bright points of light in the image, you also get a nice blooming without totally desaturating the image. It does look nice and soft, and you get that nice blooming around the highlights. Now, just looking at focus breathing, they all control the focus breathing reasonably well. And this is a particularly big deal for lenses that have a close minimum focus distance, which the Vespid Is did and the Vespid IIs also have. And across the board, particularly in normal distances, like a subject at a normal distance, and then focusing on the background or off in the distance, there was no focus breathing that was going to be distracting or ruining the images. I wouldn't say it was absolutely perfect, but it wasn't far off. Now, looking at close-up image quality, all the lenses have reasonably close minimum focus distance, bar the 85, which is not uncommon for 85s. And this is something that the Vespid Is had and the Vespid II has, and this must be something that DZO focuses on because they always mention it in their marketing material, how good the close focus is. And the thing that's great about this, you're going to be able to get nice close focus images, and you're not going to have to use a diopter. Looking at the bokeh and out of focus areas, they have 10 iris blades, which means that you should maintain a reasonably round out of focus areas and smooth bokeh as you stop the lens down. Wide open, the bokeh balls in most of them are very clean. The 18 and the 35 had just a slight onion ringing, nothing that I thought was too distracting. The other ones were pretty much clean across the board. At T1.9, most of the lenses gave you a little bit of lemon shape or cutting near the edge of frame. This gave you a slight swirly bokeh effect, which I really like. I kind of like those lemon shapes at the edge of frame when I'm wide open. When you stop it down to T2.8, the bokeh remains reasonably round. If you look very closely, sometimes you can see a little bit of geometry, but for the most part, it remains reasonably round, and it starts to remove those lemon-shaped cuttings from the edge of frame. By the time you stop down to T4, the lemon-shaped cuttings at the side of frame are gone, and all the bokeh balls are reasonably round. The general out of focus areas in all the scenes, even with foliage and sort of busy backgrounds, it really rendered those all very smoothly. So I don't think you're going to have a problem there. And it reminded me a lot of the DZO Arliss as far as that sort of smooth out of focus area goes. And I really, really like the general out of focus areas. Now, the other thing these lenses include is something called Cooke technology, and that's something I'd never heard of until I saw these lenses, and it's something developed by the CINE lens company Cooke. It supports real-time transmission of focal length, aperture, and focus distance to the camera. That can either be used in post-production or it can be used by the camera in production, potentially with a follow focus system that's compatible and can use some of that data. And at first I thought, well, that's not something that I'm ever going to use, so what's the point of that? Then I saw their little part of the website where they talk about their technology partners and who is currently partnering with them to use this Cooke technology. And the current partners are ARRI, Red, Atomos, Blackmagic, Fuji, Panasonic, Canon, Sigma, Samyang, Zeiss, and a whole bunch more. So even if it's not something that you're going to use right now, the fact that it is in these lenses and they are still budget cine lenses probably is future-proofing these lenses. It's also probably going to help or maintain the resale value of the lenses for down the track if you ever sell them. The original DZO Vespids are great lenses, and I've got a set in the studio here which are going to be used on multiple productions over the next couple of months. The Vespid IIs are a cleaner, more modern lens with significantly more control of flare and chromatic aberration. They're also noticeably sharper through the frame. They also have the new Cooke technology, which if you need it is going to be a big deal, but if you don't, it still serves to future-proof this set of lenses. And the price, while significantly more than the new discounted Vespid 1's price, they are still firmly in the budget cine lens category. Now, if you haven't seen my video on the DZO Arliss, I've just thrown that video on screen now. One thing that I've noticed while using the Vespid 2s is that the images mix really well with the Arliss series. So you could have a complete set of Vespid 2s and just mix in a few Arliss as hero lenses, and that could be a really cool look for any new production.